Anh dám làm vậy với tôi à?
Tôi chỉ làm công việc của mình thôi.
Công việc anh đang phá hoại tất cả.
Cô mới là người không hiểu gì.
Đồ khốn, tôi sẽ khiến anh phải trả giá.
Thử đi.
I don't know who let you up here, but this floor is for people who actually belong here, Vivian Langford said while sizing him up. My name is Quentin Hale, and I have a meeting here, Quentin replied, keeping his voice steady. Quentin Hale. She repeated his name, then scoffed. Sure you do, sweetheart. Kane, be a dear, and get him out of my conference room. Her security guard stepped forward and grabbed his arm. Quentin let himself be moved without a flinch, without even looking back at the woman who had just had him removed from her own building, like he was nothing. What Vivian Langford did not know was that the man she just threw out controlled every dollar that stood between her company and total collapse. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you cannot miss. The badge said, Contractor. Quentin Hale looked down at it for a second. Just 1 second. Then he clipped it onto his polo shirt and followed the receptionist to the elevator in silence. He did not say a word. The girl who handed it to him, young, nervous, barely looked up from her desk, had taken one look at him when he walked through the glass doors of Hilton Meridian and made a decision. Not a mean decision, not a thought-out decision, just a fast, automatic one. The kind people make without even knowing they are making it. Polo shirt, no tie, black man walking in alone. Must be maintenance. Quentin had been in enough rooms to know when it was happening. He felt it the same way you feel a change in weather before the clouds actually roll in. A pressure shift. Subtle, but real. Some battles were not worth fighting in a lobby. The elevator opened on the upper floor, and the receptionist pointed him toward the conference room at the end of the hall. The walls were glass, all of them, floor to ceiling. The kind of design that made everyone visible to everyone else, like a fishbowl built to impress clients. From the hallway, Quentin could see straight into the main conference room. 6 people in suits sat around a long table. At the head stood Vivian Langford. She was younger than he expected. Sharp jaw, cream-colored blazer, blonde hair pulled back tight. She had a clicker in one hand and a laser pointer in the other, and she moved through her presentation with the kind of loose, effortless confidence that came from a lifetime of never once being told no. She did not look up when he walked in. He stood just inside the doorway and waited. 1 second. 2. 3. She clicked to the next slide. Excuse me, Quentin said. His voice was calm. Even. Vivian's eyes dragged up from the screen, slow and deliberate, the way you look at something you have already decided is not worth your time. Oh, wow. She tilted her head and let her eyes travel from his shoes all the way up to his face, taking her time. A thin smile crossed her lips. Okay, I don't know who dropped the ball downstairs, but contractors use the service entrance. That's the one without the marble floors, in case the decor confused you. A couple of the people at the table shifted in their seats. Nobody looked up. My name is Quentin Hale, he said. I have a meeting. Vivian blinked. Then she laughed. A short, sharp sound like a door slamming. Quentin Hale. She repeated his name the way people repeat a bad joke to make sure they heard it right. Sure you do, sweetheart. She turned back to her screen and clicked to the next slide. Look, I'm sure whoever told you that thought they were being very helpful. But this floor is for scheduled meetings with actual stakeholders, not... She waved her hand in his general direction without looking at him. Whatever this is. The door behind Quentin opened fast. Vivian's assistant, a young woman in a gray blazer, tablet pressed to her chest, slipped inside and leaned close to Vivian's ear. Quentin watched Vivian's face as the assistant whispered, For just a moment, something moved behind those polished blue eyes. A flicker. There and gone. "I don't care," Vivian said, not to her assistant, to the room. Loud, clear, deliberate. She snapped the clicker into the nearest executive's hand and tugged her blazer straight. "I have limited time before people who actually belong here show up, and I am not doing this right now." She finally looked back at Quentin, eyes flat, smile sharper. "There's a reason you're still standing in my conference room, because I promise you wherever you need to be, it isn't here." She said it like it was funny, like he was funny. Just outside the glass wall in the small waiting area near the reception desk, Otis Grant sat alone on a leather bench. He was an architect from a mid-sized firm 2 floors below, waiting on a permit consultation that was already running late. He had his phone out, half scrolling through emails, when the scene inside the conference room caught his eye. He stopped scrolling. He watched for a moment. The woman with the laser pointer, the calm man by the door, the body language that needed no explanation. Otis had spent decades reading rooms, floor plans, structures, the way things were built, and what they were built to say. He knew what he was looking at. Slowly, he raised his phone. He was not trying to start anything. He just knew that nobody believed anything they did not see with their own eyes. He pressed record. Behind Quentin, the conference room door opened again. A large man filled the frame, security badge clipped at his hip, shoulders like a refrigerator, expression completely blank. Kane. Vivian did not even glance up. "There we go." She picked up her clicker again. "Kane, be a dear and walk our contractor back to wherever he came from." She said it like it was the easiest thing she had said all morning. Like it was nothing. Like he was nothing. Kane stepped forward and placed one thick hand on Quentin's arm. Not rough, but firm and deliberate. The kind of grip designed to move someone without making a scene. Quentin let himself be moved. He did not resist. He did not speak. He walked with Kane back down the hall, back to the elevator, his leather watch catching the light on his wrist. The same watch Rosalind gave him the day he closed his first major deal years ago, back when people looked at him the same way Vivian just had. The elevator doors slid open. Quentin stepped inside. The doors closed. He looked at his reflection in the polished metal. Polo shirt, khakis, contractor badge, and the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Not yet. The floor went quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet that falls over a room when something awkward happens. The deep, held breath kind. The kind where everyone can feel exactly what is happening, but nobody wants to be the one who reacts to it. Through the glass walls of the upper floor, the whole open office had a front row view. Executive assistants, junior analysts, mid-level managers killing time between meetings. All of them stopped. All of them watched. And not a single one of them moved. Kane walked Quentin toward the elevator with one hand still gripped around his arm. Not dragging him. Not rough. Just steady and firm and deliberate. The way you walk someone when you want them to know the choice has already been made for them. Quentin walked, head up, shoulders back, eyes forward. He did not look at anyone. He did not need to. He could feel every set of eyes on him from behind those glass panels. Could feel the particular weight of a floor full of people watching something happen that they knew was wrong, and choosing to be very busy all of a sudden. One woman at a standing desk turned her monitor slightly, pretended to read something on the screen. A man near the printer grabbed a stack of papers he did not need and shuffled them. A younger guy in a too big blazer dropped his pen on purpose just to have a reason to look down. Nobody said a word. In the waiting area near the reception desk, Otis Grant had not moved from his bench. His permit consultation was still running late. His phone was still raised. He kept it steady. Decades of drawing straight lines without a tremor in his hand, watching the whole thing play out through the glass like a window into something he could not look away from. He had seen enough in his life to know what this was. He kept recording. Near the hallway, Amara Quinn stood with her notepad pressed flat against her chest. She was young and had worked on this floor for months. She had watched a lot of things on this floor that she wished she had not. But this was something else. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes followed Quentin and Kane all the way down the hall. She did not look away. She did not pretend to be Zaisoas. She just stood there and watched, and let herself feel every uncomfortable inch of it. Because someone in this building ought to. Behind the glass, Vivian Langford had already turned back to her presentation. That was the part that landed hardest. Not the escort, not Kane. The turning back. The complete, effortless return to business. Like removing Quentin from the room was no different from clearing a coffee cup off the table. She clicked to the next slide. She said something to the executive beside her. She laughed at something. A real laugh. Loose and easy. One of the people at the table glanced toward the hallway where Quentin had just been walked out. Just for a second. Then back to the screen. That was it. That was all. The elevator bay was at the far end of the hall. Kane slowed when they reached it and pressed the down button without letting go of Quentin's arm. They stood there together, the big man in the security badge and the man in the polo shirt and the watch, waiting for the doors to open. Quentin turned his head and looked through the glass one last time. Vivian was pointing at something on the presentation screen. Her executives were nodding. The room had moved on completely, like he had never been there at all. Like he was nothing. The elevator bell chimed softly. The doors slid open. Kane guided him inside and released his arm, stepped back into the hallway without a word, did not look Quentin in the eye once, not the whole walk, not now, just stared at a fixed point above the elevator doors until they closed between them. The last thing Quentin saw before the doors shut was the upper floor, the glass walls, the frozen staff, the conference room where Vivian was already mid-sentence about something else entirely. And standing at the edge of the hallway, perfectly still, was Amara Quinn. She was looking directly at him, not with pity, not with the guilty half-smile of someone who wanted credit for feeling bad, with something steadier than that, something that said, I saw it, all of it, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't. The doors closed. The elevator began to move. Quentin stood alone in the small mirrored box and said nothing, did nothing, just breathed, just let the floor numbers tick down one by one. Back in the waiting area, Otis Grant slowly lowered his phone. He looked at the screen for a long moment. The footage clear, the audio clean, every word and every second of it captured. Kane's hand on Quentin's arm, Vivian's smile, the floor full of people looking anywhere but at the man being walked out. He pressed save. Selena Vargas was already standing in the lobby when the elevator doors opened. She had 2 coffees. She took one look at Quentin's face and held one out without saying a word. He took it. They started walking toward the revolving doors. Same pace, same direction, like they had done 100 times before. Celine matched his stride exactly. She always did. Years of working alongside this man had given her a particular kind of fluency in his silences. She could read him the way a doctor reads a chart. Fast, accurate, no guessing. How bad, she said. Security escort. She exhaled slowly through her nose, not surprised. Just tired in the specific way you get tired when the world keeps confirming things you already knew about it. Did you say anything? No. She nodded once. Good. They were near the revolving door when it happened. Upstairs on the upper floor, Vivian Langford's personal cell phone rang. Not her office line, not her assistant's extension, her personal phone. The number that lived in a small list of contacts across the entire country. Board members, her father's old attorney, 2 sitting senators, people whose calls she answered before the second ring, no matter what she was in the middle of. She glanced at the screen. Raymond Oliver, Pinnacle Sovereign Fund. She stepped away from her executives and answered. Raymond spoke for a short time. Maybe less. He did not waste words. He never did. He told her the name of the man her security guard had just walked to the elevator. He told her what that man controlled. He told her what was at stake. And then he told her that the window for fixing this mistake was closing faster than she probably realized. The color left Vivian's face in stages. She hung up and immediately called Harlan Crow. Harlan answered on the first ring. He was still at the conference table, laptop open, half listening to the tail end of her presentation. When she said Quentin Hale's name, he went very still. Vivian, tell me Raymond Oliver is wrong. Silence. Harlan, he's not wrong. Harlan's voice came out flat and careful, the way voices get when someone is choosing every word like they are stepping across ice. Hale controls the Pinnacle Fund through 3 holding companies. It's structured to keep his name off the front page. I found it weeks ago when I was running the investor profiles. I was going to brief you before the meeting, but you said, "Stop." Her voice went sharp as a blade. "Stop talking." She was already moving toward the elevator. Quentin and Celine had just pushed through the revolving door into the morning sun when they heard it. Mr. Hale. They both stopped. Vivian Langford crossed the lobby toward them at a pace that was almost running, but trying very hard not to be. Her blazer was still perfect. Her hair was still perfect, but something behind her eyes had cracked open in the last few minutes, and no amount of polish was covering it. She stopped a few feet away, clasped her hands in front of her, lifted her chin slightly. An old reflex, the body trying to hold a posture the situation no longer supported. "I owe you an apology," she said. The words came out smooth and practiced, like she had coached herself on the elevator ride down. "There was clearly a miscommunication this morning about your appointment, and There wasn't a miscommunication," Quentin said. Not mean, not loud, just true. Vivienne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She reset. "Be that as it may." She took a small step closer, dropping her voice half a register. "I'd like to ask you to come back upstairs. We can get you a proper seat at the table, proper introductions, and I'd very much like to begin our conversation today, if that's still, it's not." She blinked. "I need the week to review your prospectus properly." He held her gaze. "My team will be in touch this afternoon to confirm logistics. We're on a tight timeline," she said. The smoothness slipped just slightly. "Our bond situation requires—" "I know what your bond situation requires." He said it gently. That was somehow worse. Vivian Langford stood on the sidewalk outside her own building and looked at Quentin Hale. Really looked at him, maybe for the first time that morning, and something moved across her face that had no name, but was somewhere in the neighborhood of understanding arriving much too late. Quentin glanced briefly at Celine. Celine looked at her coffee cup. "Tomorrow," Quentin said. "My office." He turned toward the street. Celine fell into step beside him. Neither of them looked back. The revolving door was still spinning behind them when Vivian finally moved. Otis Grant never did get his permit consultation. By the time someone from the property management office finally came to find him in the waiting area, he was already gone. He had watched the whole thing play out. The escort, the glass walls, the floor full of people staring at their screens, and somewhere between the elevator doors closing and the security guard walking back to his post, he had made a decision. He walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop, sat down at a corner table, and posted the video. He was not a political person, did not have many followers, mostly colleagues and old college friends. He wrote one line above the clip. "Watched this happen this morning. The man they threw out runs a major fund. She had no idea." Then he put his phone face down on the table and ordered a coffee. Upstairs on the upper floor, Amara Quinn sat at her desk and stared at her monitor without reading a single word on the screen. She had been sitting like that for a while. The open plan office hummed around her, keyboards clicking, someone's phone ringing twice and going to voicemail, the low murmur of a call happening behind a closed door somewhere, normal sounds, as if nothing had happened, as if the whole floor had not just stood there and watched a man get walked out like he did not belong. And then, quietly gone back to work the moment the elevator doors shut. Amara pulled up her personal social media on her phone under the desk. Otis's video was already there, posted earlier. She recognized the angle immediately, the waiting area outside reception, shot through the glass. Clean footage. Every word clear. You could see Vivian's face. You could see Quentin's face. You could see Kane's hand on Quentin's arm. You could see the entire floor doing absolutely nothing. Amara watched it twice. Then she shared it to her own page without a caption. She had a few hundred followers, mostly family, a few old college friends, her mother in Savannah. She put her phone away and went back to staring at her screen. By the time Quentin and Celine reached Ellison Capital's Midtown offices, Otis's video had tens of thousands of views. Celine saw it first. She put her phone on Quentin's desk without saying anything and let him watch it. He watched it once, all the way through. Expression unreadable. Then he set the phone down and opened his laptop. "You want to talk about it?" Celine said. "No." She picked her phone back up. "Okay." By lunch, the view count was past 100,000. By mid-afternoon, the comments were running faster than anyone could read them. People tagging news accounts, sharing it to their own pages, writing long paragraphs about what they had just watched. Otis had given 3 brief follow-up interviews to reporters who tracked him down through his firm's website. He kept saying the same thing every time. "I just knew what I was looking at." Later, Celine knocked on Quentin's open office door. Hundreds of thousands of views. Quentin did not look up from his work. "Close the door on your way out." She smiled at the back of his head and pulled the door shut. He left the office later, stopped at a grocery store on the way home because his youngest had asked for strawberries recently, and he had not gotten around to it yet. He bought the strawberries. He bought pasta. He drove the rest of the way home with the radio off and the windows down. His daughters were at the kitchen table when he walked in, the younger one doing long division on a worksheet, the older one reading a chapter book with a flashlight, even though every light in the kitchen was on. They both looked up. "Dad, hey babies." He helped with the long division. He made pasta. He listened to the older one explain the entire plot of her book across dinner with the focused intensity only a child could sustain. He washed the dishes. He put them both to bed and sat on the edge of each of their mattresses for a few minutes longer than he needed to. Then he went to his study, Rosalind's photograph was on the corner of the desk. Same spot it always was. Same silver frame. Same smile. He touched the edge of the frame once, the way he always did, and sat down. The Hilton Meridian prospectus was in a folder beside the keyboard. 7 developments, thousands of families, numbers and addresses, and projections laid out across clean pages that told a story they were very carefully designed not to tell. He opened it. His phone rang. Celine. He answered. "Talk to me," Quentin said. He had the prospectus open on the desk in front of him, Rosalind's photograph in the corner, the house quiet around him, both girls asleep, the kitchen still smelling faintly of pasta and dish soap. "I've been in the municipal records for hours," Celine said. Her voice had that particular flatness it got when she had found something that made her angry, but she was holding it together until she could lay it out properly. "Pull up the development breakdown." He turned to it. "You see the 7 sites?" "I see them. Look at Linwood Street, Grayson Commons, Parkview South." She paused. "Now, look at the completion dates versus the occupancy reclassifications." Quentin looked. He read the numbers once. Then he read them again. "They convert," he said, "every single time." Her voice tightened. "Groundbreaking happens. The city hands over the subsidies. The local news runs a feel-good story about affordable housing coming to the neighborhood. Then construction takes time. And then, quietly, in the permit filings, buried in the zoning reclassifications, the buildings go market rate." She took a breath. "Multiple developments. Same pattern. Same timeline. Same result." Quentin sat back in his chair. "How many families?" "Linwood Street alone. Hundreds of families. 3 generations of people in that neighborhood. Gone." Celine's voice dropped. "Parkview South. Another couple hundred. Grayson Commons. They cleared out almost an entire block." These weren't vacant lots they were building on, Quentin. These were people's homes, people's lives. And Hilton Meridian walked in with city money, made all the right speeches, broke ground with a news crew there to film it. And then, later, those same families were looking for somewhere else to go. The prospectus sat open on the desk in front of him. Clean pages, professional fonts, color-coded maps showing the 7 proposed sites in southwest Atlanta. The language was careful and warm throughout. Community investment, neighborhood revitalization, affordable living initiatives, the kind of language designed to make something ugly sound like a gift. Quentin closed it. Not hard, just slowly and deliberately, the way you close a door on something you need a moment away from. "The current proposal," he said. "Cascade Commons." "Thousands of families," Celine said. "Southwest Atlanta, predominantly black neighborhood. City subsidies already approved. Ground hasn't broken yet." She paused. "If this deal goes through the way Vivian has it structured, those families have limited time before the reclassification paperwork starts." Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside Quentin's window, the neighborhood was completely still. A dog barked somewhere down the street and went quiet. The kind of ordinary, peaceful night that thousands of families in southwest Atlanta were living right now, not knowing what was already being planned around their kitchen tables and front porches and children's bedrooms. "Keep digging," Quentin said. "Already am." He set the phone down without hanging up. Celine always stayed on the line when she was mid-investigation, the way some people kept the TV on for company and stared at the closed prospectus. Time passed. He heard Celine typing in the occasional sound of a mouse click. Once the soft thud of what sounded like a thick folder being dropped onto a desk. Then, "Quentin," something in the way she said it made him sit forward. "Talk to me." "The bond default." She chose her words carefully, the way you handle something fragile. "It wasn't an accident." He waited. Someone shorted Hilton Meridian's debt instruments. Bought the short positions recently. She paused. Around the same time, your team made the first quiet inquiries about the investment. The same time, Raymond reached out to their fund administrator to request preliminary financials. The room felt suddenly smaller. Someone knew we were looking, Quentin said. Someone knew you were coming, Celine said. And they want this company to collapse. Not quietly. Not on its own timeline. Another pause. They want it to collapse with your name attached to it. Quentin did not move, did not speak, just sat at his desk in the dark, with Rosalind's photograph in the corner, and the closed prospectus in front of him, and the slow, clarifying weight of understanding settling across his shoulders like something physical. This was not a business deal anymore. It was not even personal anymore, or not only personal. It was a trap, carefully built, patiently set, waiting for him to walk into it wearing his own good intentions like a blindfold. He picked up the prospectus again, opened it back to the development page. Thousands of families. He looked at Rosalind's photograph for a long moment. Then he picked up his pen. Morning came in gray and quiet. Quentin was at his desk early. Celine arrived shortly after with coffee and a folder of overnight research updates. They worked in near silence for a while. The kind of focused, unhurried quiet that meant both of them were thinking hard about the same thing without needing to say it out loud. Later, Celine appeared in his doorway. They're downstairs. Quentin closed his laptop. All three of them. Vivian, Crow, and a corporate attorney I don't recognize. Young, expensive suit. She set a fresh coffee on the corner of his desk. She got here early. I know. Celine studied him for a moment. You want me in the room? No. He stood and straightened his polo shirt. Same style as before. Different color. No tie. No performance. Put them in the small conference room, not the main one. Celine allowed herself a small smile. The small conference room had no view, no artwork, and chairs that were comfortable but not impressive. It was the room Quentin used for conversations he wanted to keep plain. She understood exactly what he was doing. Give me a few minutes, he said. Vivian Langford was already seated when Quentin walked in. She had arranged herself carefully. Blazer buttoned, portfolio open, reading glasses set just so on the table in front of her, like props in a scene she had rehearsed. The corporate attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Voss, sat to her left with a legal pad. Harlan Crow sat to her right, laptop open, eyes moving to Quentin the moment he entered. Quentin shook hands with each of them, sat down, set nothing on the table. Go ahead, he said to Vivian. She went ahead. The pitch was polished. It had clearly been rebuilt overnight. Tighter language, stronger numbers, the community benefit framing pushed to the front where it would do the most work. Vivian moved through it with total confidence, her voice warm and measured, hitting every note she wanted to hit. She talked about the 7 developments. She talked about Southwest Atlanta. She used words like legacy and impact and transformation without blinking once. Quentin listened. He did not take notes. Did not nod along. Did not give her the small, encouraging reactions that people unconsciously offer when a presentation is landing. He just sat with his hands folded on the table and listened, and let the silence around his listening do its work. When she finished, he asked his first question. Linwood Street, the earlier development. What's the current occupancy demographic? A beat, just a small one, half a second. But Quentin felt it. Linwood was a different market cycle, Vivian said smoothly. The economic conditions at completion required us to... I'm asking about the current demographic. Who lives there now? Voss leaned slightly toward Vivian. Vivian did not look at her. The building transitioned to market-rate housing at completion, she said. That was disclosed in the city filings. It was, Quentin agreed pleasantly. What about Grayson Commons, the HUD grant? Where did that land on the final project accounting? The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. Harlan Crow's eyes moved from Quentin to Vivian and back again. He had not opened his laptop once since Quentin walked in. He was holding very still in the particular way of someone who was used to being very still in difficult rooms. Vivian answered every question. She was good. Genuinely good. The kind of good that comes from years of practice explaining things that do not fully add up to people who want to believe they do. She never stumbled, never deflected in an obvious way, just kept her voice warm and her language careful, and her eyes steady on Quentin's face. But Quentin kept asking, question after question, each one casual on the surface, each one landing somewhere specific underneath. He was not arguing with her. He was not accusing her of anything. He was just asking about facts one at a time, in a tone so even and unhurried that it took Vivian several minutes to realize that every answer she gave was quietly closing another door behind her. Twice Quentin glanced at Harlan. The second time Harlan looked back. And in that brief, unguarded moment, Quentin saw exactly what he had suspected the night before. Not guilt, precisely, but the exhausted, sunken look of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and was beginning to feel the weight of it in his bones. At the meeting's close, Quentin sat back. "I'll need time. Full due diligence." Vivian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Our bond window closes soon." "I know." He said it without drama. "You'll hear from me." They stood, handshakes, brief, professional, hollow. Vivian held his hand a half-second longer than necessary, one last small attempt at warmth that had nowhere to land. As they filed out, Celine appeared at the door and pressed a folded note into Quentin's hand. He read it. "Amara Quinn, the analyst who filmed the lobby. Vivian fired her this morning." He folded it once and set it on the table. "Get her number." Celine had Amara Quinn's number within the hour. She did not call it yet. Quentin asked her to wait. He wanted the full picture first before they brought anyone else into the room. So Celine set the number aside and turned her attention back to the audit. And by early afternoon, Ellison Capital's small research team had spread themselves across 2 conference tables with laptops, printed records, and municipal filing databases going back years. Quentin moved between them, like a man reading a map he already suspected was wrong. Checking coordinates, testing distances, looking for the places where the lines did not connect the way they were supposed to. It did not take long. Linwood Street came first. The building had been a mixed-income residential complex in southwest Atlanta. Hundreds of units, occupied almost entirely by black families who had lived in that neighborhood for decades. Some of them for 3 generations. Grandparents who remembered the street before the highway went in. Parents who had raised kids in those apartments, kids who were now adults with kids of their own. Years earlier, Hilton Meridian approached the city with a proposal. Renovation, modernization, affordable housing preserved and improved. The pitch was clean, and the language was moving, and the city approved millions into development subsidies within months. Vivian Langford was younger when she signed the approval documents. Construction began. The news coverage was warm. A local TV segment showed Vivian in a hard hat at the groundbreaking, smiling for the camera beside the district councilman. She talked about community. She talked about investment. She talked about the families who would benefit. Later, the building had been reclassified. Market rate. Luxury finishes. Rooftop terrace. A rebrand with a new name that did not sound anything like the old one. Hundreds of families. gone. Quentin stood over the printed records for a long moment without speaking. One of his analysts, a young woman named Tara, had highlighted the reclassification filing in yellow. The date was months after groundbreaking, almost to the day. He moved to the next table. Grayson Commons was worse. Years earlier, Hilton Meridian had applied for a HUD Community Partnership grant to support affordable housing development in Memphis. The application was detailed and compelling. Exactly the kind of proposal that grant committees approved quickly and enthusiastically. Millions were awarded. The money was supposed to go directly into construction costs for a multi-unit affordable housing complex in a low-income Memphis neighborhood. Instead, it went into Hilton Meridian's operating budget. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. It moved in pieces through a series of internal transfers that were technically legal if you squinted at them from the right angle and did not ask too many questions. Harlan Crow, then younger and years into his tenure as CFO, had processed every transfer personally. A HUD audit later flagged the irregularities. Hilton Meridian's legal team filed for arbitration the following week. The arbitration ran for years, long enough for the original auditors to rotate off the case and the paperwork to get buried under subsequent filings. The affordable housing complex in Memphis was never built. Quentin read the audit report twice. Then he slid it across the table to Celine, who read it once and set it down without a word. They came to Cascade Commons last. The documents Tara had assembled told the familiar story in its clearest form yet. Thousands of families, city subsidies already approved, ground not yet broken. But it was the internal communications that made everything else stop mattering. A strategy memo dated earlier, authored by Vivian Langford herself. The language was precise and completely without shame. Phase 1, community engagement and groundbreaking. Phase 2, construction with full public-facing affordable housing positioning. Phase 3, and here was the line that Quentin read 3 times to make sure he was reading it correctly. Transition to market rate can begin at 14 months. 14 months, not a contingency, not a possibility, a schedule. Quentin set the memo down on the table and looked out the window for a moment at the gray Atlanta afternoon. Get everything to legal, he said quietly. Every document, every filing, every transfer record. Already packaging it, Tara said. And pull Senator Orvis's direct line. He turned from the window. Not his office, his cell. Celine was already writing it down. Quentin picked up the Cascade Commons memo one more time. Read Vivian's line again. Set it face down on the table because he did not need to read it a 4th time. He already knew exactly what it said. Thousands of families. He thought about the strawberries he had bought his daughter the night before, about the quiet street outside his window, about what it meant to live somewhere and believe, really believe, that you were safe there. Celine, she looked up. Call Amara Quinn. Amara Quinn arrived early the next morning. She came through the front entrance of Ellison Capital with a laptop bag over one shoulder and a manila folder pressed against her chest, like she was holding it together with both hands. She was young, and she had been fired less than a day ago. She looked like someone who had not slept, but had made a decision sometime in the middle of the night, and was moving on it before she could talk herself out of it. Celine met her in the lobby. She did not take Amara straight to Quentin. That was not how Celine operated. Instead, she walked her to the small kitchen at the end of the hall, poured 2 cups of coffee without asking, and sat down across from her at the narrow table like they had all the time in the world. How are you doing? Celine said. Amara looked at her for a moment like she was checking whether the question was real or just a formality. Apparently, she decided it was real. I've been better, she said. I imagine. Celine wrapped both hands around her mug. Take your time. Amara had started at Hilton Meridian months ago. Fresh out of graduate school, sharp and eager, genuinely believing the way you only believe things before the world has had enough time to correct you, that real estate development could be a tool for community good. She had written her graduate thesis on affordable housing policy. She had applied to Hilton Meridian specifically because of the community development pipeline. It took her about a few months to understand what she had actually walked into. Not all at once. It happened in layers. A comment in a meeting that did not sit right. A set of internal transfer records she was not supposed to see that crossed her desk by accident. A conversation between two senior directors she overheard through a half-closed office door, casual and completely unguarded. The way people talk when they have said something so many times, it stopped feeling wrong. Phase 3. Transition. 14 months. She started keeping copies months ago. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that required accessing systems she was not authorized to use. Just documents that passed through her desk in the normal course of her job. Emails she was CC'd on. Meeting minutes she was asked to transcribe. Financial summaries routed through her workstation for formatting. She saved everything to an external drive she kept in the bottom of her laptop bag. She had not known what she was going to do with it. She just knew that someone, somewhere, was going to need to see it. And she knew that when that moment came, she wanted to be ready. When you saw what happened on your floor, Celine said. Amara nodded. I knew that was the moment. She looked down at her coffee. I just needed to know if he was the right person. And? She looked up. He walked out of that building without saying a single word, without losing anything. She paused. That told me everything I needed to know. Quentin came in a while later. He sat down across from Amara, nodded once and said, Tell me what you have. She told him. Then she opened the laptop bag. It took the better part of a couple of hours. Amara walked Quentin and Celine through every document, methodically, clearly, in the organized way of someone who had spent months building a case, even before she knew it was a case. Emails, financial transfer records, internal meeting minutes, contractor agreements that did not match their stated purposes, a chain of communications between Vivian and a city permitting official that had no business existing in the format it was in. And then, near the bottom of the stack, Amara slid a single printed document across the table. Quentin recognized it immediately. The Cascade Commons Strategy Memo, Vivian's earlier internal document, the one his own team had found the day before through their audit research. But Amara's copy was different. It had annotations, handwritten notes in the margins. Vivian's handwriting, identified by the matching signature on the front page. Notes that spelled out the Phase 3 timeline with even less ambiguity than the typed text. Numbers, dates, names of specific city officials whose cooperation had already been secured. Quentin looked at it for a long time. This came through your desk? He said. She asked me to format it for a board presentation, Amara said. I formatted it, and I kept a copy. He looked at her across the table. Young, student loans, a mother in a Hilton Meridian managed building in Savannah who had no idea what her daughter had been carrying for months. You understand what this means? He said. Going forward. Yes, Amara said. She did not hesitate. That evening, after Amara had left, and the documents had been transferred securely to Quentin's legal team, Quentin sat alone in his office and dialed Senator Paul Orvis's personal cell. Orvis answered on the second ring. He was older, years Quentin's senior, a man who had mentored him at Howard University when Quentin was a young undergraduate, still figuring out the full size of what he was capable of. They had stayed close in the decades since. Not the kind of close that needed constant contact, but the kind that meant something when it mattered. Quentin talked for a long time. He laid out everything. Linwood Street, Grayson Commons, the engineered bond default, the Cascade Commons memo, Amara's documents, the annotated copy. He spoke plainly and in order, the way he always did when the thing he was describing was serious enough to not need any dressing up. Orvis did not interrupt once. When Quentin finished, there was a brief silence. "Send me everything," Orvis said. "Tonight? Tonight!" Quentin ended the call. He sat in the quiet office for a moment, the city visible through the window, lights beginning to appear in the early evening dark. Somewhere out there, thousands of families sitting down to dinner without any idea that a woman in a cream-colored blazer had already scheduled the beginning of their displacement. He picked up his phone again, called home. The younger daughter answered on the first ring, which meant she had been sitting next to the phone. She talked for several straight minutes about something that happened at school involving a class hamster before Quentin could get a word in. He listened to every second of it. Some things you held on to harder than others. The term sheet arrived that evening. Multiple pages, clean formatting. Language that had taken Quentin's legal team the better part of a couple of days to get exactly right. Precise enough to be binding. Clear enough that nobody could later claim they had not understood what they were agreeing to. Quentin read it twice at his desk, made 2 small notes in the margin, sent the notes back to his attorney. By later, the final version was in his hands. And right on time, he forwarded it to Vivian Langford's corporate email with a single line. "Terms attached. Response required by midnight." Then he leaned back in his chair and waited. The terms were not negotiable. The first condition was a binding community benefit agreement covering all 7 proposed developments. Not suggestions, not guidelines, but hard legal commitments enforced by an independent oversight body with the authority to freeze construction at any stage if the terms were violated. Every affordable unit guaranteed for decades minimum. No reclassification. No Phase 3. The second condition was a resettlement assistance fund capitalized at millions drawn from the investment itself. Dedicated to families displaced by Hilton Meridian's previous developments, Linwood Street, Grayson Commons, Parkview South, the people who had already lost. They would not get their homes back, but they would get something. The third condition was Vivian's resignation as CEO within a short period. A board-selected successor, no golden parachute, no consulting arrangement that kept her influence in the building through a side door. The fourth condition was Harlan Crow's retention as CFO, not as a reward, but as a practical decision. Harlan knew where everything was. Under a restructured accountability framework with independent financial oversight, he was more useful inside the company than out of it. It was a cold calculation, and Quentin knew it. He made it anyway. He sat at his desk and watched the clock. Vivian's attorney called later. Quentin put the call on speaker and set the phone on the desk and let the attorney, a man named Garfield, whose voice had the particular aggressive energy of someone being paid by the confrontation, work through his objections. The community benefit agreement was overreaching. The oversight body was unconstitutional in its proposed structure. The resettlement fund had no legal precedent in a private investment agreement. Quentin's attorney answered each point in a tone so even it was almost gentle. Then Garfield got to the resignation clause. The call got louder. Quentin listened without speaking for several minutes, while Garfield explained with increasing intensity why asking Vivian Langford to step down from her own company was not only unreasonable, but potentially actionable as a form of corporate coercion. He used the word coercion several times. He used the phrase "my client's rights" repeatedly. He let the silence after each point stretch long enough to feel like a threat. Quentin's attorney looked across the desk at Quentin. Quentin shook his head once. His attorney leaned toward the phone. "The terms stand, all of them." Garfield hung up. Later, Vivian called directly. Quentin answered. She did not yell. That was not her style. Not on a call she knew could be recorded. Not at this stage of the game. Her voice was controlled and deliberate. Each word placed carefully, like furniture arranged to block a door. "The resignation clause is a deal breaker," she said. "I built this company. I am not signing away my own position as a condition of accepting investment." "Then we don't have a deal," Quentin said. A pause, long enough to mean something. "Quentin," her voice shifted slightly. Not softer exactly, but recalculated. "I understand you have feelings about what happened earlier. I've already acknowledged that. But this is a business transaction, and tying it to a personnel decision is— The terms stand, Vivian." Another pause, longer this time. "You have until midnight," he said, and ended the call. Nothing happened for a couple of hours. Celine sat across the desk from Quentin with sparkling water and a book she was not really reading. The office around them was empty. The rest of the staff had gone home earlier. The city outside the windows had settled into its nighttime version of itself, quieter and darker, the skyline holding still against the black sky. Later, Quentin's attorney called. "She's reviewing it with Garfield now." "Okay." "Quentin, if she doesn't sign by midnight, the bond default triggers automatically and—" "I know what happens," Quentin said. He set the phone down, looked at the clock on his laptop screen. Time passed. Celine put her book down and looked at the clock too. Neither of them spoke. Near midnight, the email notification arrived. Quentin opened it. The term sheet. All the pages. Vivian Langford's electronic signature at the bottom. Neat. Controlled. The signature of someone who had just made the hardest decision of her professional life and was determined not to look like it. Celine raised her sparkling water across the desk. "We got her." Quentin stared at the screen. He waited for the feeling that was supposed to come. The release, the satisfaction, the clean and simple sense of a thing resolved. He waited for it the way you wait for a sound you expect to hear. It did not come. Instead, there was something low and quiet at the back of his mind. Not a thought, exactly. More like a pressure. The particular unease of a man who has spent years making deals and knows, on some level he cannot yet name, when something is sitting slightly wrong. He asked Celine to go home. She looked at him for a moment, reading his face the way she always did. Then she picked up her bag without arguing and said goodnight, and pulled the door shut behind her. Quentin sat alone in the empty office. He pulled the signed term sheet up on his screen and read it again from the beginning. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Something is wrong. He did not know what yet. Quentin's phone rang early the next morning. He was already awake. He had slept little. The kind of shallow, restless sleep that comes when your mind refuses to fully let go of something it has not figured out yet. He had been lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling for a while, when the phone lit up on the nightstand. His attorney. Voice tight. "Turn on your television. Business news. Any channel." Quentin was already reaching for the remote. The banner across the bottom of the screen read, "Breaking. Billionaire Quentin Hale accused of orchestrating Hilton Meridian debt crisis for hostile takeover." He sat on the edge of the bed and watched. The anchor was composed and authoritative reading from a prepared script, with the practiced gravity of someone delivering news they know will travel far. The story, attributed to anonymous sources inside Hilton Meridian, claimed that Quentin Hale had deliberately engineered the company's bond default, coordinating with short sellers to manufacture a financial crisis, then positioning himself as a rescuer to force a fire sale acquisition at a fraction of the company's real value. The community benefit framework, the story claimed, was a public relations cover. A carefully constructed mask designed to make a predatory corporate takeover look like an act of social conscience. Then came the documents. Internal communications from Ellison Capital displayed on screen in fragments. Emails between Quentin's analysts using phrases like accelerating the timeline and maximizing pressure on the default window. And most damaging of all, a line that read, "Hilton collapse creates optimal entry conditions." Quentin stared at that last line. He knew exactly what it was. It came from a risk modeling exercise his team ran on every single acquisition target, a standard analytical process that mapped worst-case and best-case market scenarios. Every private equity firm in the country ran the same exercise. The line meant nothing except in isolation, stripped of the pages of context surrounding it. In isolation, it looked like a confession. His attorney was still on the line. "Quentin, I see it. Several of the institutional co-investors have already called my office early." He said nothing. "The term sheet, it hasn't gone to your board for ratification yet, which means it's not binding on your side. If this story takes hold before we can—" "I hear you," Quentin said. "Give me an hour." By later, the story had metastasized. It was on every major business network. It was trending across social media. The same platforms that days ago had been flooded with Otis Grant's video of Vivian walking Quentin out were now flooded with a different narrative entirely. Screenshots of the leaked documents, opinion segments, hot takes from commentators who had never heard Quentin Hale's name before and were now speaking about his character with total confidence. His phone did not stop. Several institutional co-investors, as his attorney had warned. Board members from companies where Quentin held non-executive director positions. A journalist from a financial publication asking for comment. Then another journalist. Then a third. And then the notification that landed differently than all the others. The Crestwood Foundation, a civil rights organization Quentin had funded quietly and consistently for years, nearly millions total, posted a public statement on their website. It was carefully written, clearly lawyered, and devastating in its precision. It did not accuse Quentin of anything. It simply stated that in light of the emerging reports, the Foundation felt it necessary to request clarity and transparency from all parties involved before making further public comment. Quentin read it twice. Years, millions, and the moment the first bad story broke, before a single fact had been verified, before anyone had asked him a single question, the statement was already drafted and posted. Celine arrived at the office later. She read the room before she read anything else, set a coffee on his desk, and pulled up every relevant screen without being asked. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Later, a reporter reached Harlan Crow by phone. Harlan's quote ran on the business network a short time later, scrolling across the bottom of the screen in clean white text. "I can't comment on Mr. Hale's intentions." 7 words, perfectly neutral, perfectly poisonous. Quentin looked at it on the screen for a moment. Then he looked away. Later, his phone rang again. Vivian Langford. He let it ring twice. Then he answered. Her voice was completely calm, not the fractured, recalculated calm of the previous night's phone call. This was something different. This was the composure of someone who had been holding a card in their hand since before Quentin ever walked into her building, and had at the moment of their choosing, put it on the table. I think we need to renegotiate the terms, Quentin. She used his first name, like they were old friends, like she had won. Celine did not bring coffee. That was how Quentin knew she understood exactly how serious it was. In years, Celine Vargas had never once walked into a room where Quentin was sitting without bringing coffee. It was the most reliable thing in his professional life, more reliable than markets, more reliable than contracts, more reliable than most people he had ever done business with. She walked in later, stood at the window with her arms crossed, and looked out at the city. No coffee, no folder, no phone. Just the window and the silence and the particular stillness of a woman who was holding herself together by deciding not to move. Quentin sat at his desk with Vivian's words still sitting in his ear, like something that had burrowed in and made itself at home. I think we need to renegotiate the terms, Quentin. He turned his chair toward the window, looked at Celine's back. She played you, Celine said. She said it quietly and without cruelty, not an accusation, just the truth delivered by someone who loved him enough to say it plainly. She played the narrative, Quentin said. There's a difference. Celine turned from the window. Walk me through it, she said. He walked her through it. The timeline was clean once you saw it, almost elegant in the way that traps are elegant when they have been built by someone patient and intelligent and completely without conscience. Vivian had signed the term sheet near midnight, not because she intended to honor it, because signing gave her what she actually needed. A short window of apparent resolution during which Quentin and Celine and the legal team would exhale and stand down, while Vivian's people quietly delivered a pre-packaged story to every major business outlet on their contact list. A story built from real documents stripped of all context, assembled to say exactly one thing. Quentin Hale manufactured this crisis. The plan was not to survive the deal. The plan was to destroy it. Blow up the agreement. Discredit Quentin publicly. Use the resulting chaos to push past the bond default window long enough to find a different buyer, a quieter one, a more compliant one who would not arrive with pages of non-negotiable community protections and a resignation clause. She had never intended to step down. She had never intended to honor the community benefit agreement. She had never intended to fund the resettlement assistance for the families her company had displaced. She had signed a document she was already planning to bury before the ink dried. Celine listened to all of it without interrupting. When Quentin finished, she was quiet for a moment. So, what do we do? She said. Quentin straightened in his chair. We make 3 phone calls. The first call was to his attorney. He kept it short. 3 instructions. Pull every internal communication cited in the news report, every single one, and release them in full, unredacted, with complete timestamps and the surrounding context that the leak had deliberately removed. No statement, no press conference, no spokesperson reading talking points from a podium, just the raw documents, released proactively and completely, posted publicly within the hour. His attorney started to say something about legal risk. The risk, Quentin said, is letting the shadows stand, flood them with light. A pause. Yes, sir, his attorney said. The second call was to Amara Quinn. She answered on the first ring, which told him she had been waiting. I need you to do something difficult today, he said. And I need you to understand that once you do it, there's no walking it back. A brief silence. I've been not walking things back since the other day, Amara said. Tell me what you need, he told her. A press conference. Not a major network. Not a corporate podium with a logo behind her. 3 specific journalists. the Atlanta Journal-Constitution housing beat, a documentary journalist who had spent years on Southern displacement, a reporter from a Black-owned outlet with millions of subscribers, 3 people who would know exactly what they were holding when Amara put the documents in their hands. "Today," Quentin said. "This afternoon, if you can manage it." "I can manage it," Amara said. The third call was to Senator Paul Orvis. Quentin dialed the personal cell, not the office line, not the chief of staff. The number that meant this is Be Real, and it is urgent, and I need you, not your office. Orvis answered before the second ring was finished. "Paul," Quentin kept his voice steady. "I need a day and 1 Senate hearing slot. I'll explain everything. I just need the room." A silence. Short. The silence of a man who had known Quentin Hale for years and had never once heard him ask for something he did not genuinely need. "You'll have it," Orvis said, before Quentin had fully finished the sentence. Quentin set the phone down on the desk. Across the room, Celine uncrossed her arms. Some of the tension in her shoulders dropped by a fraction. Not gone, but shifted, changed in quality. The difference between a weight that is crushing you and a weight that you have decided to carry on purpose. She looked at Quentin. For the first time since early that morning, the room felt less like a place where something terrible had happened, and more like a place where something was being built. "Okay," Celine said. She finally went to get the coffee. The room Amara borrowed was nothing special. A plain conference room on a lower floor of a shared office building, a couple of blocks from Ellison Capital. The kind of space that small nonprofits and independent consultants rented by the hour. Rectangular table, several chairs, a window that looked out onto a parking structure. No logo on the wall, no podium, no backdrop designed to make anyone look important. Amara had chosen it on purpose. She did not want important. She wanted believed. The 3 journalists arrived within minutes of each other, that afternoon. First through the door was Carolyn Sechrist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Experienced, housing beat for years. The kind of reporter who had spent a decade being handed press releases about community investment and had learned to read the space between the lines. She came in with a recorder and a legal pad and sat down without small talk. Next was Andre Bilski, the documentary journalist, wire-rimmed glasses, a quiet intensity about him that made you feel like he was filing everything away, even when he was not taking notes. He had spent years embedded in Southern communities affected by displacement. He had seen Linwood Street with his own eyes, had filmed families loading moving boxes into borrowed trucks on an ordinary afternoon. He sat down next to Carolyn and opened his laptop. Last was Keisha Mander from the Meridian Report, a Black-owned media outlet with millions of subscribers and a reputation for stories that the major networks picked up hours after Keisha had already broken them. She was sharp and direct, and she had watched Otis Grant's video multiple times and texted her editor after the second viewing. "This one matters." Amara stood at the head of the table. She had the laptop bag in front of her, the manila folder, months of work distilled into documents that told a story so clearly that they barely needed her to explain them. She looked at the 3 journalists. They looked back at her. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm going to show you everything. I'm going to answer every question you have. And then I'm going to ask you to report what you see, not what you've been told to see." Carolyn clicked her recorder on. Amara opened the folder. She started with Linwood Street. She walked them through the timeline, the subsidies, the groundbreaking, the news segment with Vivian Langford in a hard hat, the reclassification filing months later. She showed them the original community benefit promises in the city application. Then the final permit records that contradicted every one of them. She showed them photographs, not from any file, but ones she had found herself, taken by a local community organizer who had documented the displacement as it happened. Families on doorsteps with nowhere to go. Children sitting on packed boxes. Andre Bilski looked at the photographs for a long time without speaking. Then she showed them the Grayson Commons transfer records. The millions. Harlan Crow's signature on every internal transfer. The HUD audit. The years of arbitration that buried it. Keisha Mander had stopped typing. She was just reading. Then Amara slid the Cascade Commons strategy memo across the table. Carolyn Secrist picked it up. Read it. Set it down. Picked it up again. This is in her handwriting, Carolyn said. The annotations in the margin. The Phase 3 timeline spelled out in Vivian Langford's own hand. This is her actual handwriting. She asked me to format it for a board presentation, Amara said. I formatted it, and I kept a copy. The room was very quiet for a moment. Keisha Mander sat back in her chair and looked at Amara with an expression that was not quite surprise and not quite admiration, but somewhere between the two. You've been sitting on this for months. I was waiting for the right moment, Amara said, and the right person. The questions ran for a long time. Amara answered every single one. She did not hedge. She did not qualify. She spoke in the plain, direct language of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in her head so many times that the actual version felt almost simple by comparison. When it was over, the three journalists packed up in near silence, the particular silence of people who know they are holding something significant and are already thinking about what comes next. Carolyn Secrist paused at the door. You understand what this is going to do? Yes, Amara said. To her, to the company, to you. Yes, Amara said. Again, same tone, same steadiness. Carolyn looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded once, the small, specific nod of one woman recognizing something in another, and walked out. By evening, the stories were live. All three published within a short time of each other, each one carrying the full weight of the documents Amara had placed in their hands. Quickly, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution piece had been shared tens of thousands of times. Soon after, the Meridian Reports version was the top trending story on multiple platforms. By later, the major networks that had spent all morning running the hit against Quentin were quietly pulling their earlier segments and replacing them with new ones. The civil rights organization that had posted its cautious statement earlier that morning retracted it and replaced it with a full condemnation of Hilton Meridian. Several paragraphs, unambiguous, signed by the executive director personally. Multiple Atlanta City Council members issued a joint statement calling for an emergency review of all Hilton Meridian municipal contracts. The ACLU announced in a brief official notice posted to their website that the Grayson Commons audit had been formally reopened. Quentin read each story at his desk. Celine sat across from him, refreshing her screen. Every few minutes, watching the numbers climb. Neither of them celebrated. It was not that kind of moment. It was the kind of moment you moved through carefully with your eyes open because the work was not finished yet. And the people who needed protecting still needed protecting. Quentin set his phone face down on the desk. Thought about thousands of families in Southwest Atlanta sitting down to dinner on a Friday night. Picked up his phone again and dialed home. The younger daughter answered on the first ring. Harlan Crow's apartment was on an upper floor of a building in Buckhead. It was a nice apartment. Good view, good furniture. The kind of place that looked like a reward for years of hard work and said nothing at all about what that work had actually required. Harlan had moved in years ago, right after Vivian gave him his first significant bonus. A number that had felt at the time like validation, like proof that the choices he had been making were the right ones. He sat on his couch that afternoon with the television on, and a drink he had not touched on the coffee table in front of him. The coverage was everywhere. Not the morning coverage. Not the hit piece about Quentin that Vivian's people had planted. The story that had felt for a few hours like it might actually hold. That story was collapsing in real time. Channel after channel, the framing was shifting. The documents Amara had handed those 3 journalists were moving through the media like water, finding every crack, filling every space. Impossible to stop once it started. Harlan watched Carolyn Seacrest's piece run on the local news, watched Andre Bilski's documentary segment get picked up by a national cable network, watched Keisha Mander's story climb to the top of every trending list in real time, the share numbers climbing so fast the screen could barely keep up. He watched Vivian Langford's name get attached, in clear and specific language, to every displacement, every diverted grant, every family that had packed their things and left a neighborhood they had lived in for generations because Hilton Meridian had decided their homes were more valuable without them in it. He watched his own name appear twice. Harlan Crow had not started out this way. That was the thing he came back to, sitting alone in the apartment that Vivian's money had paid for. He had not started out as the man who processed the transfers, had not started out as the man who formatted the arbitration filings that buried the Grayson Commons audit, had not started out as the man who sat in a meeting room and said nothing while a woman with a laser pointer had a black man walked out of her own building because he was not dressed the way money was supposed to look. He had started out as a kid from Columbus, Ohio, with a graduate degree and a genuine belief that business could be done the right way. Vivian had recruited him when he was still idealistic enough to believe that her community development pitch was real. By the time he understood what it actually was, he was older, and his name was already on too many documents to walk away cleanly. So he had stayed and kept his head down and processed the transfers and watched the audits get buried, and told himself the way people tell themselves things, they do not fully believe that he was not the one making the decisions. He had started quietly cooperating with the SEC inquiry weeks ago. Not out of courage, he was honest enough with himself to know that, out of self-preservation. The inquiry was low-level, early stage, and when the investigator reached out through his personal attorney, Harlan had provided limited documents, just enough to demonstrate good faith. Testing the water, his attorney had called it. The water had been manageable then. Watching Amara lay everything bare on television, Harlan understood that the water was no longer manageable. It was boiling. He sat on his couch for a long time, long enough for the drink to go warm. Long enough for the coverage to cycle through twice. Long enough for Vivian Langford's name to appear on his phone screen once. A call he watched ring through to voicemail without moving. He did not listen to the voicemail. He picked up his phone and called his attorney. His attorney called Quentin's attorney later. Harlan had documentation of everything, not the limited, carefully selected documents he had provided to the SEC inquiry. Everything. The full email chain between Vivian and her PR firm, dated days before the term sheet was signed. The communications authorizing the media hit. The strategy documents outlining the plan to void the deal and locate a compliant buyer with no community benefit requirements. Signing had always been the trap. Every word of it. The late-night phone call, Garfield's aggressive pushback on the resignation clause. The minutes to midnight signature had been theater, a performance designed to create a window. While Quentin's team exhaled, Vivian's people were already on the phone with journalists. Harlan had the emails. He had the names. He had the identity of the PR firm she had paid to plant the story. A firm with no listed connection to Hilton Meridian, used specifically to keep Vivian's fingerprints off the leak. He provided everything. Quentin's attorney called a short time later. Quentin listened without interrupting, standing at his office window with the city spread out below him and Celine watching his face from across the room. When his attorney finished, Quentin was quiet for exactly a few seconds. "File everything with the SEC tonight," he said. He lowered the phone. Outside, Atlanta moved through its afternoon. Traffic building on the expressway. The sky shifting toward the long golden light of early evening. Thousands of families in southwest Atlanta living their ordinary lives in the homes they did not yet know had already been fought for and won. The subpoena arrived at Vivian Langford's home address early Saturday morning. She was already awake, already dressed. She had spent the previous night on the phone with Garfield and 2 other attorneys, rebuilding a defense out of the wreckage of a plan that had stopped working somewhere between Amara's press conference and Harlan Crow's call to the SEC. By the time the process server knocked on her door, she had several legal strategies and a public relations firm on standby. She signed for the document, closed the door, read it, standing in her entryway. Senate Subcommittee on Housing and Urban Affairs Emergency Field Hearing, Atlanta. She had limited time. The hearing room was a converted ballroom on the 2nd floor of a federal building in downtown Atlanta. High ceilings, long tables arranged in a U-shape, seats for witnesses at one end, and the subcommittee panel at the other. By early, the room was full. Staffers, attorneys, journalists, including Carolyn Sechrist and Keisha Mander, seated in the press row with recorders already running. Members of the public filled the back rows, standing room only by the time the doors were officially opened. Vivian arrived with several attorneys. She sat at the witness table with her portfolio in front of her and her spine perfectly straight. The posture of someone who had faced difficult rooms before and survived them. She had not faced a room like this before. Right on time, Senator Paul Orvis entered and took his seat at the center of the panel. He was older, a broad-shouldered man, with close-cropped gray at his temples, and the unhurried, deliberate presence of someone who had been doing serious work for a long time and had no interest in performing it. He did not arrange papers theatrically, did not let his gaze sweep the room for effect. He simply sat down, put on his reading glasses, and opened the folder in front of him. "This hearing is called to order," he said. His voice was quiet. It filled the room completely. The first witness was a woman named Dorothea Barnes, elderly, Linwood Street, 3rd generation. She testified by video from a community center in Decatur, seated at a folding table with her hands folded in front of her. She described moving into her apartment at Linwood Street years earlier, described raising her daughter there, described the Hilton Meridian representatives who came to the building years ago with promises and clipboards and warm, reassuring smiles. Described the letter she received later, informing her that her unit had been reclassified and her lease would not be renewed. She was older when she left. She had been in an assisted living facility since then. Not by choice, but because the options available to an older woman with no housing and a fixed income were limited. She spoke for several minutes in a voice that did not waver once. Vivian Langford looked at the table in front of her throughout the testimony. The HPD official came next. Then the Grayson Commons documentation. Then Harlan Crow. Harlan took his seat at the witness table with the particular posture of a man who had made a decision and was living inside it now with all the discomfort that entailed. He answered every question put to him by the subcommittee counsel in the flat, precise language of someone who had spent the previous hours in conversation with his attorney, rehearsing exactly this. He confirmed the Grayson Commons transfers, confirmed the arbitration strategy, confirmed the pre-planned media hit, the PR firm, the email chain, the authorization. He confirmed that Vivian Langford had signed the term sheet with full knowledge and intention that it would never be honored. He did not look at Vivian once during his testimony. Vivian's attorneys objected to several questions. Orvis sustained one. Then came Amara. She sat at the witness table in a navy blazer she had borrowed from Celine that morning, slightly too long in the sleeves, which somehow made her look more real, not less. She was young, and she had lost her job and spent months carrying something heavy in the bottom of a laptop bag, and she sat there in front of a Senate subcommittee and told the truth with a composure that settled over the room like weather. When she finished, Keisha Mander had stopped typing and was simply watching. Then Vivian was called. She answered the first question with a carefully constructed response about market conditions, the second with a reference to proper legal channels, the third with a statement about the complexity of municipal development agreements. On the fourth question concerning the Cascade Commons strategy memo and the annotated Phase 3 timeline, Garfield leaned toward her and said something quietly. Vivian straightened her blazer. "On the advice of counsel," she said, "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. 1. 2. On the Grayson Commons transfers. 3. On the HUD grant diversion. 4. 5. 6. Each invocation landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. No splash, just the ring spreading outward, touching every wall. 8, 9. In the press row, Carolyn Sechrist was writing without looking at her notepad. 10, 11. The 11th invocation fell into complete silence. Senator Orvis let the silence stand for a full few seconds. Then he made a note in his folder, removed his reading glasses, and looked up at the room. "The final witness," he said, "is Mr. Quentin Hale." Quentin walked to the witness table in a polo shirt and his leather watch. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, looked at the subcommittee panel, at Orvis, who gave him nothing from the bench, just the steady, expectant look of a man who had known him for years and was ready to hear him speak. Quentin did not speak about himself. He spoke about Rosalind, about the Memphis development she had grown up in, about the promise she had made him keep, about the day years ago when she put this watch on his wrist and told him that money was only as good as what you built with it. He spoke about thousands of families in Southwest Atlanta. He spoke about Amara Quinn, who risked everything on an ordinary morning with a laptop bag and a few hundred followers, and the specific, unshakable courage of someone who had decided that looking away was no longer something she was willing to do. He did not raise his voice once. When he finished, the room was completely silent. Senator Orvis sat with his pen resting on the folder. He did not write anything, did not reach for his reading glasses, just sat with the weight of what he had heard and let it be what it was. Then he closed the hearing. The consequences did not arrive slowly. They came all at once, the way things do when pressure has been building long enough. Not a gradual unraveling, but a sudden, complete collapse. Everything falling at the same moment from the same height. Monday morning, the city of Atlanta suspended every active Hilton Meridian municipal contract, pending investigation. All 7. Hundreds of millions in projects, frozen mid-stride like a photograph of something in the middle of falling. The announcement came from the mayor's office early in a statement that was brief and precise and left no room for interpretation. By mid-morning, the SEC issued a formal notice confirming the opening of a fraud investigation into Hilton Meridian's bond practices. The notice cited testimony from the hearing and documentary evidence filed by Harlan Crow's legal team the previous night. It named Hilton Meridian specifically. It named no one else. It did not need to. Later, Hilton Meridian's board of directors convened an emergency session. The vote was unanimous. Vivian Langford was removed as CEO, effective immediately. She was in her office when building security arrived. Two of them, professional, quiet, the same measured efficiency that Kane had brought to walking Quentin Hale to the elevator days ago. Except this time, there was no meeting to get back to. No presentation waiting on the screen. No floor full of people pretending not to watch. They were all watching. Through the same glass walls that had displayed Quentin's escort to every person on the upper floor days earlier, the entire office watched Vivian Langford pick up her personal items. The framed photograph from her desk, her portfolio, the cream-colored blazer she draped over the back of her chair, and walk with the two security officers toward the elevator. She kept her spine straight, kept her chin up, but the room she walked through was not the room she had commanded days ago. It was the same glass, the same carpet, the same furniture, but something essential had shifted in it. The particular atmosphere of unchallenged authority that had kept an entire floor looking at their screens. While a man was walked out for no reason other than the assumptions of the woman now being escorted toward those same elevator doors. That atmosphere was gone. The elevator opened. Vivian stepped inside. The doors closed. The upper floor exhaled. Quentin restructured the investment that afternoon. Not the original deal. Not the acquisition of Hilton Meridian. Not the transfer of hundreds of millions to a company whose board was now in crisis management and whose CEO had just invoked the Fifth Amendment multiple times in a federal hearing. Something better. Something that could not be undone by a board vote, or a resignation clause, or a midnight signature made in bad faith. His legal team worked through the afternoon on a new framework. By early evening, it was done. The Cascade Commons Community Trust, an independent nonprofit private partnership capitalized by a major investment from Ellison Capital, governed by a community-elected oversight board, with full legal authority over every development decision. The thousands of families in Southwest Atlanta, protected by deed restriction for decades. Built to own units, fixed affordability requirements, no reclassification mechanism of any kind. No Phase 3, no 14-month timeline. No version of the document in any language, in any filing, in any city permit application that left a door open for what Hilton Meridian had done to Linwood Street, to Grayson Commons, to the hundreds of families from Parkview South who had watched the same smooth promises play out and believed them right up until the letter arrived. The trust was real, permanent, built to outlast the people who built it. Days later, Quentin drove to Memphis. He went alone. No Celine, no legal team, no agenda. Just the drive and the city and the building on Greer Street where Rosalind had grown up. It still stood. That always mattered to him. The fact that it still stood. Same brick, same iron railings on the front steps, same row of mailboxes in the lobby, the old brass-colored ones. Some of the name slots still showing the same family names from decades back. He sat on the bench across the street and looked at it for a while. He was turning the watch over in his fingers, the leather band worn soft at the edges now, the face slightly scratched from years of daily wear, when he heard footsteps on the sidewalk behind him. Celine sat down, handed him a coffee without a word. They sat together in the late afternoon quiet, the Memphis street easy and unhurried around them, the building across the road holding everything it had always held. Vivian's attorneys filed a motion this morning, Celine said eventually. Preliminary injunction against the SEC investigation. Garfield's arguing procedural grounds. Quentin nodded slowly. They'll file more after that one fails, Celine said. Then, probably a civil suit. Could drag on years. He looked at the building across the street at the mailboxes visible through the lobby glass, at the light moving across the brick in the late afternoon way that light moves across brick when it has been doing so for a long time. Let them file, Quentin said. He turned his face toward the light. Thought about thousands of families in southwest Atlanta, about Dorothea Barnes, elderly, testifying at a folding table in a community center with her hands folded and her voice completely steady, about Amara Quinn in a borrowed blazer with sleeves slightly too long telling the truth in front of a Senate subcommittee because she had decided months ago in the bottom of a laptop bag that the truth deserved to be kept somewhere safe until someone was ready to use it. About Rosalind, about the watch, about the only promise that had ever really mattered. We already built the thing, he said. Celine wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. The Memphis street moved around them slow and ordinary, and full of people living their lives in the places they called home. The bench was warm in the afternoon sun. Neither of them moved for a long time. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.